Have you been waiting for the real estate bubble to pop? Have you been waiting for the market to crash? For all of you that have been eagerly anticipating this for years now, I finally got some data that might show that we might be on that path. I'm also going to answer the question, is now a good time to buy real estate? If you've watched my videos before, my answer over the years has always been the same. Stick around to the end of this video and I'm going to give you a slightly different answer this time. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel Living in Oregon. I am your host, Seth Marchant, licensed real estate broker in the state of Oregon and Washington, where we show you what it's like to live in Oregon, focusing around the Portland, Vancouver metropolitan area. A lot of our videos are showing you the area, what it's like, driving tours, neighborhood tours, and periodically we'll do some videos that covers the market conditions so that you can make more of an educated buying or selling decision. So if you want to see more videos like this, make sure and subscribe to this channel. Always give us a thumbs up if this video helped you. And as always, if you have more questions, I invite you to call, text, email, reach out however you'd like. You can find all of the contact information in the description of this video, or you can hit that QR code and that'll take you to our website. All right, let's jump into some of the data. Like I mentioned, I've got some data that's going to be a little bit different than we've been seeing in past years. I'm going to start with some local data, and then we're going to look at some national data. We're going to look at some data for every single state. So all of you watching from outside of Oregon might find some of these things interesting. This is data from our local RMLS. And the first thing that we always look at is that graph on the right, inventory in months. And as we can see, that number 3.6, about as high as we've seen, certainly as high as we've seen in previous years in the summertime of inventory. What does that mean? It means there's a lot more homes for sale than there has been previously. Now here's where some of the data gets interesting. If we compare June versus May of 2025, down in the right-hand corner, we can see that new listings are down 15%. Sales are down 1.5%. Now, average sale price is actually up 1.7%, although, as you've probably heard me mention before, sale price does not exactly equal home values. These two correlate, but they don't always mean the same thing. Just might mean that sometimes people are buying a little bit more home than they've bought previously, and I've actually got a little bit of data to show you that's going to represent that towards the bottom of this graph. If you're not familiar with the real estate markets, summertime, especially in a place that's a little bit more seasonal like Oregon, tends to peak a little bit more than some of the other states, and as you can see with sales being down right now, that's going to be an indicator that inventory is going to continue to rise, which leans the market more towards a buyer's market. If we compare this time in June of 2025 to June of 2024, new listings are slightly up year over year, although sales down quite a bit more, down 4.5%. Again, an indicator as to why the inventory is building up. In other words, the market is really starting to soften and become more of a buyer's market. This graph shows you where the transactions are happening, mostly from that $400,000 to $700,000 range, which means this is going to be where the bulk of the buyers are at. Here's where it starts to get interesting. Active residential listings compared to the last 2 years, you can see dramatically higher. So it looks like we're going to continue to see inventory to build up despite new listings being slightly down from 2023 and just slightly up from 2024. But here's where it gets really interesting. I'm going to skip these two pending and closed sales. Average total time on market just slightly up, but here's the thing that people ask about the most. Average sold price change. One of the most common questions we get is, where are homes selling relative to the list price? Now, more than ever, real estate, as they say, is local, and it's going to be more local than it has been in the last couple of years. In other words, it really depends on the home. It really depends on the neighborhood. It really depends on how the home is priced. But just generally speaking, we can see that 2025, which is that orange line, homes are selling about 0.5% less than the list price, whereas if we go back to 2023, it's slightly above list price. And I mentioned to you that the average sales price being slightly up doesn't necessarily always mean that home values are up. It just means sometimes that people are buying a little bit more home, which is indicated here in this graph. You can see people are buying slightly larger homes this time compared to last year and the previous year. And in fact, prices are slightly down, which means price per square foot is actually down. So in other words, people are getting a little bit more for their money this year than they were in the previous 2 years. So is now a good time to buy? Well, inventory is up and it's going to be less competitive than it was in the previous 2 years, but that's not the only thing that we're going to look at to answer that question. Let's look at rates. Right now, rates right at 6 3/4, so 6.75%. Compared to a year ago, we were right at 7.08%, so almost 1/4% higher. Not a huge deal, not a big jump. That's not going to dramatically impact your mortgage payment, but rates are still slightly lower. Home values year over year. Redfin has home values up 0.6% year over year. Zillow has home values up 0.8% year over year. And according to Altos, it still is a very, very slight seller's advantage. Again, this is national data though. This is what things look like state by state. So we've got 11 homes that have either been stagnant or home values have actually gone down since 2024. You can see Oregon at 1%, really kind of falling right in line with some of the national average data that we saw from Redfin and from Zillow. California remains strong, which I think is helpful for a lot of our buyers. We get a lot of buyers calling us from California. Many of them own real estate. And if you watched my previous Portland versus LA video, you probably saw that real estate values here are about half, if not more, what they are here in a lot of places in major metro areas in California, such as LA or the Bay Area. So that's a great arbitrage for people coming from California. But one thing you might find very interesting, look at this, there are nearly 500,000 more sellers than there are buyers. In other words, right now we're seeing less competition than we've seen in the last couple of years. What's competition going to look like going forward? Well, I probably don't have to make this argument to you. Everybody typically tends to agree that if mortgage rates did go back down to where they were a few years ago, say they got down to 3%, we would see mortgage applications go dramatically up. The orange line that you see there is mortgage rates, and this blue opaque color that you see is applications. So when rates go down, applications go up. We can see that rates slightly dipping recently. You can always expect that trend to continue. So between rates and between inventory is now a good time to buy a house. Again, if you've watched my videos before, my answer has always been the same. And if you haven't watched my videos before, my answer is that the best time to buy a house or to buy a property is when it's best for you. The reason being, and I'm going to get to a caveat here in just a moment. Like I mentioned, I promised you I'd give you a slightly different answer. The reason being is because it's very difficult to speculate on real estate. Even the people that do this for a living, investors, real estate geniuses, these people get it wrong. Most famously, a lot of them got it wrong just a few years ago during lockdowns, during COVID, in which a lot of people speculated that home values were going to go, or real estate values were going to go down during COVID because we had lockdowns and because people were not going to be able to see or show real estate. But what we saw was actually the opposite. Real estate values went up 20% year over year in most of the places in this country. And so in other words, trying to guess what the real estate market is very difficult to do. That's why I say it's always just best to buy when it's best for you. And of course, as a real estate broker, I understand there's some implicit bias. A realtor oftentimes might tell you that now is always the best time to buy. Well, I'm not going to tell you that now is the best time to buy, but what I am going to tell you, if we look at rates being lower than they were last year, and we look at inventory being higher and starting to climb, if we look at the market in general, in other words, it's becoming softer, it's leaning more and more towards a buyer's market, without question, now is a better time to buy than last year, and probably a better time than it was 2 years ago. I'm not going to try and predict the future. Again, I think it's impossible to speculate. Can't tell you if a year from now it's going to be better to buy, but for sure right now is better than it has been last year or the previous 2 years. The next time I buy a piece of real estate, I'm going to hope that market conditions are similar to what they are right now. I'd actually rather pay a slightly higher rate and potentially be able to pay a lower rate later than pay a higher price. You can't change the price that you pay for real estate, but you might get lucky and you might have rates go down. You might be able to refi later. Now, I will say that the way that I approach that is I'm always going to assume when I take out a loan that that rate is not going to change. I think it's better to be safe than sorry. If rates do go down and I get to refi, I'm just going to consider that gravy. I'm going to consider that a bonus. I'm not going to expect that rates are going to go down. If I had to bet, and I am a betting person, I would bet that rates will go down in the next 2 to 5 years. Enough so that a lot of people that have rates around the 6 or even the 7% range, enough so that you're actually going to be able to refinance and have a lower monthly mortgage payment. But I don't think it's wise to be house poor and bank on rates going down. Now, again, I will say the market is as local as it's ever been. In other words, some places the market is really kind of slow, really kind of dead, and other places are still seeing multiple offers. It really just depends on the neighborhood, depends on the home, how turnkey the home is, what the price range is. A lot of the competition we're seeing really is around average price points for Portland, which is around the $600,000 mark. Once you kind of get into the move up price range, which is like $800,000 to like $1.2 million, we do start to see a lot less competition. And that's because a lot of people that might typically be buying those homes, people that are maybe having kids or maybe they need extra room for parents that they take care of, don't want to trade that lower rate for that higher rate. So those people are kind of sitting, waiting on the sidelines right now. Again, if you have questions, now more than ever, it's important to have an expert guiding you through this process, whether buying or selling. So I invite you to call, text, email, however you want to get in touch. And of course, if you want to see more videos, we do, again, these videos periodically where we tell you about the market and the market conditions, but a lot of our videos are really just showing you what it's like to live in Oregon, introducing you to all of the neighborhoods. So if you want to see more videos, make sure and subscribe. Always give me a like if this helped. Feel free to comment below and we'll reply back. And until next time, take care, everyone.